Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. Hello, everyone. How's everybody doing? How are you guys doing today? You guys having a good day? I hope you guys are having a good day. I'm having a great day. So, Mighty Avengers. Yes, we are picking up with Mighty Avengers. For those of you guys who are not familiar with Mighty Avengers, we've talked about it. We've never covered it or never covered any of the stories from it because I just wanted to cover this one just for the sake of having it. So the way this originally played out is most of you guys are familiar with the Civil War event, right? Superhuman registration, that kind of a thing. Tony Stark was for it. Captain America was against it. You kind of had two factions that broke out of that, right? You had Captain America's Secret Avengers. They weren't technically called that, but that's more or less what they were. The Secret Avengers were an actual team, and they were more or less Black Ops Avengers team. It was kind of cool for a little while, actually. And then you had the Avengers team assembled by Iron Man that was designed to be a team of individuals who were for superhuman registration, and then were kind of carrying all that stuff on. So initially this picks up when Thanos shows up on Earth and the Avengers are out in space fighting against the Builders, right? So you got like Thor, Captain America, all those guys all facing off against the Builders. You've got the new Avengers team, which is basically the Illuminati, who were trying to figure out what was causing the incursions, right? So that's what they're doing at the time. And so for the most part, you have what amounts to a skeleton crew of superheroes on Earth. And so what you end up having is you end up having the Ebony Maw, and you have Proxima Midnight, who were sent to Earth, along with like Corvus Glaive, he's sent there as well, and then like Super Giants, sent there as well. You basically have the Cull Obsidian of Thanos that's sent to Earth. And while this is going on, right, while this initial invasion begins to prep by Thanos, you've got Luke Cage, White Tiger, and Power Man. Now, to kind of offer a quick little rundown here, White Tiger, Ava, she's basically like the fifth person to hold that title. Honestly, I always thought Casper Cole was the more interesting character. But White Tiger, the concept's been around for a long time. The reason why she's wearing a necklace, if you look there, she's got like a green amulet. That's what gives her powers, right? So she doesn't really have powers to speak of. She's an expert martial artist. She has enhanced durability, speed, different things like that. So it's your standard fare. She's on par with like Shang-Chi or Iron Fists or somebody like that. Like she's a capable fighter, part of that side of Marvel Comics. Then you have Victor Alvarez. He's the new Power Man, and his power is actually a little cooler. He was an old school Heroes for Hire character, but he had this visor that he wore that absorbed bioelectric energy. There came a point during the events of Dark Reign, which actually was technically the Shadowland event with Daredevil, but there was a point where basically Bullseye blew up the building that him and his father were in, along with like 107 other people or something like that. It ended up being that his father and 107 other people died, and with the fragments of his visor, basically Victor ended up absorbing like all the bioelectric energy, more or less the chi of all the people around him, and essentially has the ability to do that, right? So he can absorb the chi of others and then be able to do all the things that they can do. Not like unlimited. It's not like he can absorb the chi energy, quote unquote, of like Professor Xavier and then have telepathy. It doesn't really seem to work that way. Marvel keeps it pretty small in scale, and they don't really definitively explain it. They just kind of leave it contextual. So until a situation comes along where Power Man like absorbs the energy of Xavier and then has telepathy, there's no real reason to believe that he can't. But the long and short of it is with Luke Cage himself, after the events of, well, really like Utopia and all that kind of stuff. So essentially New Avengers Volume 2, kind of going into issue number 30 in around 2012, he basically ended up leaving the New Avengers and then going back to doing Heroes for Hire. And the reason why was because with all the things that the Avengers do and all the various escapades they have and the danger they put themselves in, it took Luke Cage away from his family, from Jessica Jones and Danielle Cage, and put him in jeopardy, right? Not only that, but after the events of like Secret Invasion, it also put them in jeopardy, right? So it was one of these things of, okay, let's go back to kind of live a normal life so I don't have to worry about my family dying all the time or me dying all the time or whatever it is, and so he ended up leaving and kind of going back to more familiar grounds with Heroes for Hire. The important thing here is that this team is essentially Heroes for Hire, right? You got Luke Cage, you got White Tiger, you got Power Man, and they're basically facing off against this guy, the Plunderer, who ended up invading, or at least showing up on the docks of Horizon Labs to essentially steal a whole bunch of Horizon Labs tech, which those of you guys who are familiar with that know that this leads to the introduction, or I guess the showing up of Superior Spider-Man. Because this takes place during Dan Slott's run and the Superior Spider-Man story, right? That's when all this kind of takes place. And so you basically have Superior Spider-Man who shows up, and he really tries to deal with it on his own. Now, the important thing to understand here is that over the course of Superior Spider-Man, precious few people knew that Superior Spider-Man was actually Dr. Octopus, who took over the body of Peter Parker. And so as far as everybody here is aware, it's actually Spider-Man. It's Peter. He's speaking uncharacteristically, but they just kind of chalk it up to like an attitude shift or something like that, right? Peter Parker just got fed up basically, you know, has just kind of been a dick for like the last few months. That's more or less what people kind of see it as, right? Like his favorite restaurant closed and now he's pissed. But it's one of these funny things where he almost kind of like makes fun of them, right? He refers to the heroes for hire as like mercenaries, you know, as just like, you know, guys who are just like small time, right? He calls them a shoddy gang. And Luke Cage kind of takes that personally, but in reality, that's always kind of what heroes for hire was, right? I mean, Luke Cage literally flew across the world and went after Doctor Doom to collect $200, right? I've got a video on it down in the description. Like, go check it out. It's hilarious. Like that's what made him cool back in the day, is they were a super ground level team. That in the comedy between Luke Cage and Iron Fist, but they were always kind of considered to be a sort of ragtag team, right? Like barely holding it together, running on a shoestring budget. That's how they always sort of were. And so it's one of these cool little references, these cool little Easter eggs, if you know the history of Luke Cage and the history of heroes for hire. But essentially you end up having White Tiger who kind of chimes in here and says, hey, look, you know, I'm going to follow Spider-Man's lead here. You know, there has to be something better than this. You know, I did this whole thing to honor my family. Now, the reality is there's history between those two characters, between Spider-Man and Ava. Back during the day, or at least back in the day, you had a guy by the name of Gideon Mace. And Gideon Mace was a character who ended up basically killing, or at least going after and I think ultimately killing the uncle, I think it was, of White Tiger, essentially the first White Tiger. Ended up killing him, I think it was. Peter Parker ended up tracking down Gideon Mace and then basically busted him and then I think had him turned in, and then Gideon Mace ended up dying later on. But because of the fact that Peter was able to get, you know, to get some measure of revenge for her family, which Ava was not able to do at the time, she's always kind of had a respect for him, right? Now, eventually she became White Tiger and then became a superhero, but her philosophy was always like, we do this for the betterment of the world, right? We do it to make the world a better place. We don't really do it for money, right? Like, as far as the heroes for hire is concerned, their philosophy is like, if the money's there, we don't care. That was actually the tagline for Painkiller Already, the podcast back in the day. If you guys don't know, I was actually on an episode of that. It was super cool, right? Like Woody's gamer tag and all those guys. It was awesome. I'll link that down in the description too. But as a result of that, we end up basically having White Tiger, who essentially comes up with the idea, or really indicates that she's leaving the team, right? She's leaving heroes for hire, which really just kind of leaves Luke Cage and Power Man, who don't necessarily see eye to eye, right? And so what we end up doing is shifting over to a villain by the name of Blue Streak, right? And that's kind of the thing that's going on here. And I hope you guys are kind of noticing this. It's one of these scenarios where, with the X-Men kind of doing their thing, being off and really staying isolated from the world for the most part, because the X-Men don't really get involved in superhero antics unless it involves them specifically, right? They're not really like the world's protectors. And with the Avengers being off planet and being out in space, then like it's a kid in a candy store for all the villains, right? They're just out doing their thing, right? But, you know, when the boss is away or when the cat's away, the mouse will play. And that's really what this is. And so Blue Streak sucks, right? He's on rollerblades, which haven't been a thing since like 1997. But he's on rollerblades, and ultimately he's caught up to by Spectrum Monica Rambeau. Now, the cool thing about Monica Rambeau, she was Miss Marvel for a time. She really came into her own when she became Spectrum, and she remained that way for quite some time. But even then, during the time this story was written, she can manipulate all different forms of light energy, basically, you know, like everything across the electromagnetic spectrum, hence the name. But Al Ewing is the one who's writing this story. And so it makes sense that by the time we got to Ultimates during the events of All New, All Different Marvel or whatever it was, Al Ewing was like, well, let's expand on her character, right? Like, let's basically have her character made of like pure light, different things along those lines. Adam Brashear figured a lot of that stuff out. But nonetheless, basically she takes out Blue Streak pretty quickly, and then like he ends up like, I think she busts a windshield in the process, and she's like, just blame it on him, and then leaves. She's kind of a jerk. But we end up basically having her traveling to kind of like where she gets her costumes done, different things like that, which is actually one of the cool things about Al Ewing. He's very Chris Claremont in that regard, right? Like a lot of writers now just basically focus on like the events, right? They're just kind of like, okay, the Avengers are here and they're fighting a bad guy, and then they win. And then the next story arc is now another bad guy's showing up and they win. You never really get to see the stuff in between the stories. And that's what made Chris Claremont writing so good. But it's also one of the cool little tidbits that you get with Al Ewing when he writes, right? It's one of the reasons why he's one of my favorite writers. But then Monica Rambeau is basically met by a guy that we're not really given purview to, right? We can't really see this particular person. You know, the reason why this whole thing happens, or why the two of them meet up, is because one, they were already meeting, and two, this coincides with the arrival of Proxima Midnight along with a whole bunch of Thanos' Outriders, and basically launching an attack against New York. Now, at the time this is going on, and this is kind of highlighted in Infinity and also shown here, Doctor Strange has essentially been manipulated by the Maw. Now, the coolest thing about Ebony Maw, and the one thing I did not like about him with Infinity War, is Ebony Maw was super dangerous because he could talk you into things, right? He had the gift of gab. He didn't have like telepathy or telekinesis or anything like that. He didn't have any powers. He could just talk you into doing things. But the idea is, with Proxima Midnight showing up, you know, her alongside the Outriders, the various forces of Thanos, you know, they really just kind of, you know, begin attacking. Explosions are going on, different things like that. And that's when we switch over to Monica and this guy she's talking to, right? His whole response is, people aren't supposed to know that I'm here. And so she's like, well, then just put on a costume. costume, right? And so he ends up actually donning this costume and going by the name of Spider Hero. Now, 50 points to whoever it is that can guess who this guy is. No using the Marvel Wiki, you cannot cheat. Let me know if you know who this guy is, because I know, and if you do know who he is, it's a really cool Easter egg, right? It's a really cool little appearance here, and he'll actually end up joining the team for a really, really short amount of time, which is kind of cool. At the same time, because this attack takes place in New York, we also see Superior Spider-Man joining the Mighty Avengers as well, right? So much like the original New Avengers that came together because Electro took down power to the supervillain prison, the Raft, this team came together more or less by circumstance, right? So it's kind of a cool thing, because when they all join up and they all end up fighting, Proxima Midnight doesn't really take them seriously, because, you know, where the response of really the question of Luke Cage is like, let's get the Avengers, right? Like let's find the Avengers, like somebody get a hold of them, right? We need big guns, Thor, Hulk, all those guys. The response of Superior Spider-Man is, well, they're in space, they're not here, so I don't know what to tell you. And so Proxima Midnight kind of makes fun of him a little bit, right? Like that's why we're here on Earth right now, is because you have nobody protecting it. Also, then Luke Cage's response is, if you want the Avengers, then that's fine, we're the Avengers, right? Like we here are now the Avengers, hence the formation of the Mighty Avengers. And so what you end up getting is this really cool battle between all these guys. And again, you kind of had these villains who are more or less somewhat reformed that were working for Superior Spider-Man. He's using them as cannon fodder, right? You know, one of the guys is like, you know, I really don't want to die. And he's like, well, what am I paying you for? If that's the case, like, go die. And if you die, that's just the way it goes. But the funny thing about this is that the Mighty Avengers are able to put up a pretty credible threat. Now, the most powerful of all these guys here is Spectrum by a wide margin, right? She's definitely an Omega level threat. Being able to manipulate the entirety of the electromagnetic spectrum is no small thing. She could wipe out all life on Earth if she chose to, right? She's clearly in the upper echelons. But the cool thing about this is that by the end of the story, we are going to get another person added onto this team who's going to be very OP. It's going to be really, really cool, right? But nonetheless, the Mighty Avengers are able to hold their own pretty well. And that's kind of a cool thing, right? Because I mean, you've got Luke Cage, who has indestructible skin, right? He can die of things like radiation poisoning, or if you dropped him from the top of like the Empire State Building, just by having like the impact of his organs smashing against his bones in his body when he hits the ground, his skin wouldn't break, but like it'd be like an explosion went off inside of it and all that kind of stuff. So there's ways to kill him, right? Just because he has indestructible skin does not mean he cannot be destroyed. But what you also have here is Proxima Midnight's spear. And the cool thing about it is that it basically impacts, you know, the spear of Proxima Midnight basically operates on a light level, right? So it's the perfect way to essentially take out Spectrum, right? It's fighting fire with fire. And that's exactly what happens. She ends up falling fast. Like as soon as she goes down, almost everybody else begins to go down with her, because what you end up having is Proxima Midnight, who takes it to Luke Cage and then is actually able to break skin. And then we have the introduction of probably one of the most powerful people ever in the history of Marvel Comics, this old woman right here, because she's just kind of like, she calls Proxima Midnight a fascist, and she's like, you cannot pass. This old lady's got some balls. She throws a brick at Proxima Midnight. So like beyond Omega level, this old lady, like the old lady that's what we're gonna call her. But like the neighborhood's fighting back, and that's one of the cool things that you don't really get to see a lot when it comes to these kinds of stories. I mean, you're talking about somebody like Proxima Midnight with like enhanced strength and durability and well able to withstand like a brick, but you don't really get to see a lot of stories where like the neighborhood fights back. That's one of the cool things about the old Fantastic Four stories, you know, where you had like Wyatt Wingfoot and you had like Yancey Street, and you would see like the neighborhood fight back against a threat. You don't really see that much anymore, right? I mean, the Marvel kind of operates under this idea that like people are helpless and can't really do anything right, and like the superheroes are going to save the day, because what's humanity going to do? This old lady, and here's a crazy thing, this old lady is about to be like taken out, right? Like she's about to get destroyed by Proxima Midnight, which is kind of messed up, right? Like attacking grandma. Like that's just something you don't do. Luke Cage, of course, ends up catching her hand in time and basically starts taking it to Proxima Midnight, and that's when you kind of see the team begin to sort of rebound, right? To kind of begin to come back. But in the middle of it all, suddenly this voice comes out and says, stop, right? Thanos basically chimes in and says, you promised me a dead city. Now again, Thanos, he's the big guy running the show here. He brought together the Cull Obsidian. They would all fall before him, right? Like Thanos would just destroy every single one of them. Proxima Midnight, being instructed by Thanos, it's like, you told me you would conquer this city. You know, you need to go, like I sent you here to go take care of Namor. You said you could take care of New York. Obviously you can't. So go take care of the task that I assigned you, and like we'll just leave this place, or we won't worry about it. Now the reality is Thanos knows what's going on, right? And even Proxima Midnight does. Her whole response here is, I told you guys I was going to make this quick. I told you guys that I would kill you fast, but you guys wanted to fight and you guys wanted to battle. So now you've got to deal with what the Maw has planned for you, and that's going to be very, very painful and very, very slow. And the reason why is because as that happens, suddenly you have this disembodied voice chiming in out of nowhere saying, before all was, I was. Before time was, I waited, right? I fed on the screaming souls of universes. I drank the spoiled milk of dead stars. I am the emptiness outside all understanding. I am Shuma-Gorath. This guy would easily be able to destroy the entirety of the Avengers team. Now, this is kind of a cool thing that you don't really get to see all that often in Marvel, right? One, we don't really get to see Shuma-Gorath all that often, but two, like, seeing this happen is cool because it means Thanos knows who Shuma-Gorath is, right? Thanos and his forces are aware of who this guy is, and that's something that you never really get to see referenced, right? We've never seen Thanos reference Shuma-Gorath ever in the history of Marvel, and it's awesome to see him here. Right now, in terms of what happened next, it's the coolest thing ever. The reason why is because we end up switching over for a forgotten hero who was once a global protector. We pick up with none other than Adam Brashear. And Adam Brashear has been met with the arrival of Uatu the Watcher. You know, and it's kind of like, why are you here? Right? Because they've hung out before. They know who the other is. The Watcher has a very particular interest in Adam Brashear because of how powerful Adam Brashear is. And Adam's like, why are you here? Right? Like, I guess something's about to pop off. The world's about to end or something like that, and the Watcher doesn't really say anything. He's like, okay, fine, like, I guess that's the case, like, you know, like, whatever, like, you know, I ended up moving out of the house after my wife died, and, you know, it was too painful to be there, but, like, if you're here, that means things are about to pop off. And the Watcher's not saying anything because of his whole pact of non-intervention, but Adam kind of tries to blow it off, like, I really don't want to have to act, I really don't want to have to get involved, I just want to stay here, I just want to focus on my things. When I get involved, people get hurt. I just want to stay here, I don't want to have any involvement. Where the Watcher just keeps staying, and the Watcher just keeps staring. And so Adam says, okay, fine. So he goes to his device, which is designed to monitor Earth for various threats, and he's met with the arrival of a level 7 invasion. And it's like, what in the heck is a level 7 threat, right? He's like, I built this thing, and I've never seen anything more than a level 4, right? So level 7 seems to be the most extreme indication. The result of this is that Adam Brashear dons his suit, and Adam Brashear goes flying into action for no other purpose than to face off against Shuma-Gorath. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, in the next video that we will cover, it will be the Blue Marvel versus Shuma-Gorath. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoy these cliffhangers, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.